So our nav mesh is set up. We can go ahead and find our enemy prefabs. So to do that, we want to go into assets. We're going to go to resources, prefabs, and then enemies. And you're going to see there's 4 prefabs in here. We can ignore the projectile. We're going to be working with the crawler, the rocktopus, and the wasp. And what we can do is select our crawler, and in the animator controller here, you're going to see this cranian _1. We're going to go ahead and double click that, and it's going to open up our animator panel. And you're going to see, similar to animators that we've done before, if you were in Time Traveler, this is going to look very familiar. What we want to do is set up our transitions from specific states depending on which animator we're working with. So in the case of our cranian here, or our crawler as we're calling it, what we need to do is set up the transition between idle and walk. So to do that, what we need to say is we right click our idle state here, and we say make transition, make transition, and we put our mouse down over walk. That's going to create this arrow. We actually want to click on the arrow and do 2 things. We want to uncheck this has exit time field. We want to make sure we have that set to off. And then we want to click this plus button and make sure our condition is set to walk is true. Because when the walk condition is true, this parameter up here, we want it to transition from its idle animation to its walk cycle. Next, we want to select our walk node by right-clicking it and do the same thing. We're going to hit make transition, and we're going to make a transition back up to the idle animation, because when walk is set to false, we need it to be able to switch back to its idle animation. So we're going to go to conditions, make sure that walk is selected, and this time we're going to click the drop down and select false. That's it for our first enemy. We're going to go back to our enemy prefab folder. This time we're going to select the rocktopus. And what we want to do is set up a transition from attack to idle. So we're going to right click attack and hit make transition and move the arrow down to idle. And this one we can actually leave empty because our attack condition is set from the any state node. So if you click this arrow between any state and attack, you'll see the attack condition. But this transition between attack and idle doesn't need one because the parameter that controls attacking is what's called a trigger. A Boolean value is a value that when it's set to true will stay true and continue activating this animation until we manually set it to false. A trigger, which is what the attack and die parameters are using, will only play the animation once and then transition to the next animation. So what will happen is it will attack, and then after the attack is finished, it will automatically transition to idle, where it will probably then transition back into the walk state, or it could transition back to attack if it decides to attack you again. Finally, we need to open the wasp. So if we click on the wasp, we can double click controller, or it can switch automatically. And this time we're going to set up the transition for our die state. So we're going to select any state, click make transition, and move our mouse up to die. And then we're going to select our arrow here, hit the plus sign, the drop down, and select the not the take damage trigger. We need to scroll down and select the die trigger. And that's going to allow us to trigger a death animation on our enemies here. And that's going to be crucial in getting some more information to our player about when they've actually killed their enemies. Once you've got these 3 animators set up, you can go ahead and hit save. And in the next step, we're going to start actually writing our AI.